At my promotion party, my dad laughed loud enough for the whole table to hear. "We're only here because your brother didn't have plans tonight." My mom smirked and said, "Don't get used to this attention. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing." I just sat there, smiling quietly, because the next morning, every single one of them would wake up to a front-page photo and a group chat message that would change how they looked at me forever. I, 32M, never expected my promotion party to be the night everything finally clicked into place. The restaurant was nice. Not fancy, but the kind of place where cloth napkins actually meant something. I'd reserved the private room 3 weeks in advance, sent out careful invitations, made sure everyone had the date circled. Regional manager at 32 felt like an achievement worth celebrating, especially after 6 years of 70-hour weeks and missed holidays. My girlfriend sat beside me, her hand occasionally finding mine under the table, offering silent support that I desperately needed. Dad arrived late, as usual. He walked in like he owned the place, slapping backs and shaking hands with my colleagues before even glancing my way. Mom followed behind him, already scanning the room with that particular expression she wore when she was mentally cataloging everything to criticize later. My brother showed up 15 minutes after them, still in his gym clothes, scrolling through his phone. The first hour went well enough. My boss gave a short speech about dedication and leadership. A few coworkers shared funny stories from our team-building exercises. I felt genuinely good, like maybe this night would be different. Like maybe, for once, they'd see me as something other than the backup child. Then Dad started drinking. It began with comments about the menu prices. He made sure everyone heard him joke about how I was finally spending money like I had some. Mom laughed at that one, her wine glass raised in mock celebration. My brother didn't look up from his phone. When the appetizers arrived, Dad launched into a story about my brother's recent golf tournament. Nobody had asked. Nobody seemed particularly interested. But he told it anyway, his voice growing louder with each detail, commanding attention the way he always did. My girlfriend squeezed my hand harder. She could sense what was coming. 6 months of dating had taught her to read the warning signs in my family dynamics. The way Mom's eyes would glitter with something cold before she delivered a backhanded compliment. The way Dad would dominate conversations, steering everything back to my brother's accomplishments. The way I would shrink smaller and smaller, my achievements dissolving like sugar in hot water. The main course came. My boss asked about my plans for the new position, the initiatives I wanted to implement. I was explaining my strategy for the Northern Territories when Dad interrupted with a booming laugh that made several people at neighboring tables turn to look. He announced to everyone within earshot that they were only here because my brother didn't have plans tonight. Otherwise, he said, they would have been at his place watching the game. The table went quiet. My boss shifted uncomfortably. A colleague stared down at her plate. My girlfriend's grip on my hand went from supportive to restraining, as if she knew I was about to stand up and leave. But I didn't move. I just sat there, my face frozen in that practiced smile I perfected over 3 decades. Mom seized the opportunity. She leaned forward, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, and told me not to get used to this attention. She said it was a once-in-a-lifetime thing, this little celebration. She reminded everyone that my brother had his master's degree, his consulting firm, his life that actually mattered. This party, she explained to my colleagues like they were children who needed things spelled out, was just a nice gesture. Nothing more. My brother finally looked up from his phone long enough to smirk. I kept smiling. I nodded. I even thanked them for coming, my voice steady and calm. Inside, though, something crystallized. A decision I'd been circling around for months suddenly became absolutely clear. The years of being second choice, of having my accomplishments diminished, of watching them pour everything into my brother while treating me like an afterthought. It was all about to mean something different. Because I had something they didn't know about. Something I'd been sitting on for 8 months, waiting for exactly the right moment. Last March, I'd been going through some old financial documents at Mom and Dad's house, helping them organize for tax season. They'd asked me to handle it because my brother was too busy with his consulting work. While sorting through bank statements and investment portfolios, I found something interesting. A series of transfers, always in round numbers, always to the same account. My brother's account. At first, I thought maybe it was legitimate help. Parents supporting their kids wasn't unusual, but the amounts were staggering. Over the past 5 years, they'd transferred nearly $400,000 to him. Money that came from the inheritance they'd received when Grandma died. Money they told me was tied up in investments and retirement accounts, unavailable for things like helping with my college loans or my first house down payment. I'd asked for $15,000 once, 3 years ago, to help cover an emergency medical bill after a car accident. Dad had given me a lecture about financial responsibility that lasted 30 minutes. He told me real men didn't ask their parents for handouts. Meanwhile, my brother had been receiving monthly deposits of $5,000 to $10,000 like clockwork. But that wasn't even the best part. I dug deeper, curiosity overcoming my better judgment. My brother's consulting firm, the one they bragged about constantly, was barely breaking even. His master's degree had come from an online program that was later investigated for credential fraud. The golf tournaments Dad loved to mention? My brother hadn't won any of them. He'd participated, sure, but his actual performance was mediocre at best. The entire image they'd built around him was a carefully constructed facade, held together by their money and their willingness to lie. And I had documentation for all of it. Bank statements, tax returns, business filings, even email exchanges where they discussed how to hide the transfers from me. I'd spent months deciding what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to confront them privately, to demand an explanation and maybe even an apology. But a larger part of me, the part that had been beaten down and dismissed for 32 years, wanted something more. The promotion party continued around me. Dessert arrived. My boss made another toast. My girlfriend tried to salvage the evening by steering conversation toward lighter topics. But I barely heard any of it. I was thinking about the photograph sitting in my phone, the one I'd arranged to have published in tomorrow's Sunday business section. Our local paper had a feature called Rising Stars in Business. They profiled young professionals making waves in their industries. I'd been interviewed 3 weeks ago, right after my promotion was announced. The journalist had been thorough, asking about my background, my journey, my family support system. I told her everything. Not bitterly, not angrily, just factually. I'd explained how I'd worked my way through college while my parents paid for my brother's education. How I'd built my career from entry-level positions while he'd been handed opportunities through their connections. How I'd learned to rely on myself because asking them for help always came with conditions and criticism. The article was good, really good. The kind of piece that made you root for the underdog. But the photograph, that was the masterpiece. I'd insisted on a family photo. The journalist thought it was a nice touch, showing the support system behind the success story. We'd taken it at my parents' house. All of us gathered in their living room. Mom and Dad stood in the back, arms crossed, looking vaguely uncomfortable. My brother lounged on the couch, phone in hand, barely acknowledging the camera. And I stood in the center, professional and composed, with a caption that would read, "Despite minimal family support, he built his own path to success." The article would go live at 6 a.m. The paper would hit driveways by 7. And at 8 a.m., I'd scheduled a message to send to the family group chat. Not anything dramatic or accusatory. Just a simple link to the article with a caption, "Thought you'd want to see this." But there was more. I'd also prepared a second message, timed to send an hour later. This one would include photographs of the bank statements, a spreadsheet I'd created tracking all the transfers, and a brief explanation of what they were looking at. I'd CC'd it to extended family members, aunts, uncles, cousins, all the people who'd watched my parents play favorites for decades, but never said anything. The subject line would read, "The real story behind my brother's success." Sitting at that table, watching Dad tell another story about my brother's fictional achievements while Mom nodded along like a proud peacock, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Control. Agency. The power to shape my own narrative instead of being a supporting character in theirs. The party wound down around 10. People said their goodbyes, offering congratulations that felt hollow after my parents' performance. My boss pulled me aside and told me not to let family politics diminish what I'd accomplished. He didn't elaborate, but his meaning was clear. My girlfriend hugged me tight in the parking lot and asked if I was okay. I told her I would be. Mom and Dad left without saying goodbye to me. They found my brother by the bar, and the three of them walked out together, already planning their next get-together. I watched them go, that smile still fixed on my face. That night, I barely slept. My girlfriend stayed over, sensing I needed company even if I wasn't ready to talk about everything. She knew some of the history, the surface-level favoritism and dismissiveness, but not the full extent of what I discovered. Not yet. That conversation would come later, after tomorrow's revelations played out. At 5:30 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the sky lighten from black to deep blue to pale gray. My phone sat on the table in front of me, the scheduled messages queued and ready. I could still cancel them. I could take the high road, let it all go, continue being the bigger person like I'd been my entire life. But why? What had being the bigger person ever gotten me except a promotion party where my own parents announced they'd rather be somewhere else? 6 a.m. arrived. My phone buzzed with a notification from the newspaper's website. The article was live. I opened it, reading through the journalist's words one more time. She'd captured everything perfectly: the struggle, the determination, the quiet resilience of building something from nothing. The photograph showed exactly what I wanted people to see: a successful young man surrounded by a family that had never quite figured out how to celebrate him. At 8 a.m., the first message sent. I watched the group chat light up with read receipts. Mom was awake. Dad was awake. My brother was, surprisingly, also awake. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then the typing indicators started appearing and disappearing, appearing and disappearing. My phone rang. Dad's name flashed on the screen. I declined the call. It rang again immediately. Declined again. Then Mom tried. Declined. My brother sent a text asking what the hell I was trying to pull. I didn't respond. At 9 a.m., the second message sent. This time, the reaction was immediate. My phone exploded with calls and texts. Dad called 6 times in rapid succession. Mom sent a string of messages that started with confusion and quickly escalated to anger. My brother's texts became increasingly frantic, demanding I take down the documents, asking how I'd gotten access to private financial information, threatening legal action. But the extended family's responses were different. An aunt messaged privately to say she'd always suspected something like this. A cousin called to tell me he respected what I'd done. Uncle reached out asking if I needed anything, if there was support he could offer that he hadn't provided before. The newspaper article started getting shared on social media. Friends from high school commented, congratulating me and noting how they'd always thought my brother had it easy. Former colleagues chimed in with their own stories of family favoritism and overcoming it. The narrative was writing itself, and it wasn't the one my parents had carefully curated for 3 decades. Update 1. The fallout took 3 days to fully develop. Dad showed up at my apartment on Sunday afternoon, demanding I let him in. I watched through the peephole as he pounded on the door, his face red with anger. He shouted about betrayal, about family loyalty, about how I'd embarrassed them in front of everyone they knew. I didn't open the door. Eventually, he left. Mom tried a different approach. She called my girlfriend, crying, explaining that I'd misunderstood the financial situation. She claimed the money they'd given my brother was a loan, that he was paying it back, that I was destroying the family over a misunderstanding. My girlfriend, to her credit, told Mom she should have thought about that before publicly humiliating me at my own promotion party. Then she hung up. My brother's consulting firm started receiving questions from clients. Someone had done digging, finding the business filings I'd referenced, confirming that his revenue didn't match the lifestyle he'd been projecting. 2 clients pulled their contracts. His carefully built house of cards was shaking. Work became my sanctuary. My boss pulled me aside Monday morning and told me he'd read the article. He said it explained a lot about my work ethic and independence. Instead of the scandal damaging my professional reputation, it seemed to enhance it. People respected someone who'd built success without a safety net. By Wednesday, extended family members were choosing sides. A few defended my parents, arguing that what they did with their money was their business. But more rallied around me, sharing their own stories of watching my parents play favorites, of seeing me overlooked and undervalued for years. Thanksgiving plans, still 3 weeks away, were already being rearranged. Several relatives announced they'd be hosting separate dinners, making it clear my parents weren't welcome. The most unexpected response came from Grandma's sister, my great-aunt. She called me Thursday evening, her voice sharp with anger that wasn't directed at me. She told me Grandma had left specific instructions about her inheritance. The money was supposed to be divided equally between me and my brother for education and first homes. She'd put it in writing, a clause in the will that my parents had apparently ignored. My great-aunt had a copy of that will. She asked if I wanted her to pursue legal action. I told her I'd think about it. Update 2. 2 weeks after the article published, my brother showed up at my office. Security called up to check if I'd see him. I was surprised he'd even attempted this, but curiosity won out. I told them to send him up. He looked terrible. The polish he usually wore like armor had cracked. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His hair needed cutting. When he sat down across from my desk, he didn't make eye contact. He explained that 3 more clients had left. His business partner was considering dissolving their partnership. Mom and Dad were refusing to send any more money, cutting him off completely now that everyone knew about the transfers. He was looking at bankruptcy within 6 months unless something changed. He didn't apologize for the promotion party. He didn't acknowledge the years of preferential treatment or the way our parents had built him up while tearing me down. Instead, he asked if I could talk to the family, maybe smooth things over, help restore his reputation. He suggested that if I admitted I'd exaggerated or misunderstood the financial situation, people might forgive and forget. I let him finish. Then I asked him if he remembered my graduation from college. He looked confused by the question. I reminded him that he hadn't attended. He'd had a golf tournament that day, and Mom and Dad had gone to support him instead of celebrating my achievement. I'd walked across that stage and collected my diploma with my girlfriend's family in the audience, not my own. I told him I remembered every single time I'd been made to feel less than him. Every accomplishment that was diminished, every cry for help that was met with lectures about self-reliance while he got blank checks. I'd kept a mental ledger for 32 years, and it had finally come due. He asked what I wanted from him. I told him the truth, nothing. I didn't want his apology because it wouldn't be genuine. I didn't want his friendship because we'd never really been brothers in any meaningful sense. I just wanted him to understand that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences arrive all at once instead of in manageable installments. He left without another word. I watched him walk to the elevator, shoulders slumped, and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt, just a calm sense of closure. Mom and Dad made one final attempt at reconciliation 3 weeks after the article. They invited me to dinner, just the 3 of us, promising we could talk through everything. I agreed, curious to see if they'd actually acknowledge what they'd done. The dinner was at an expensive steakhouse, the kind of place they usually reserve for celebrating my brother. Dad ordered wine. Mom wore pearls. They were performing, even now, unable to drop the facade even in private. They started with excuses. They claimed they'd given my brother more financial support because he'd needed it more, because his career path was riskier, because they believed in his potential. They never mentioned that his need was manufactured by his own poor decisions, or that my career path had been harder specifically because they'd refused to help. They acted like benefactors explaining their charitable priorities, not parents accounting for decades of favoritism. Then came the real reason for the dinner. They needed me to make a public statement retracting the financial details I'd shared. Dad's business connections were suffering. People were asking questions about their judgment and character. Mom's social circle had turned cold. They were being excluded from events, whispered about at gatherings. The damage to their reputation was, according to them, undeserved and cruel. I asked if they remembered what Mom had said at my promotion party. She claimed not to recall the specific words. I repeated them verbatim. Don't get used to this attention. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I asked if she understood how that had felt, being told by my own mother that celebrating my success was an aberration, not something I should expect. She said I was being too sensitive. Dad agreed, adding that I'd always taken things too personally. I stood up from the table. I told them I wouldn't be retracting anything, because nothing I'd shared was untrue. I explained that their reputation was suffering because their behavior deserved consequences, and I was tired of protecting them from the fallout of their own choices. Then I left them sitting there, their expensive steaks growing cold, their carefully rehearsed appeals falling on empty chairs. Update 3. It's been 2 months since the article published. Life has settled into a new normal that feels both strange and right. My relationship with my parents is essentially non-existent. We haven't spoken since that final dinner. They've made no further attempts to contact me, and I haven't reached out to them. My brother has gone similarly silent, presumably too focused on salvaging his collapsing business to worry about family dynamics. The extended family has fractured along predictable lines, but I've grown closer to relatives I'd previously only seen at major holidays. My great-aunt followed through on investigating Grandma's will. It turns out my parents had indeed violated the terms of the inheritance. She's pursuing legal action, though she's made clear any recovered funds would go to me, not her. I've told her I don't need the money. The principle matters more than the cash. Work has been better than ever. The vulnerability I showed in that article, the willingness to admit struggle and imperfect family dynamics, resonated with colleagues and clients. I've received 3 job offers from competing firms, all with significant salary increases. I haven't taken any of them yet, but it's nice to know my value isn't dependent on family connections or inherited advantages. My girlfriend and I moved in together last month. She's been my anchor through all of this, never pushing me toward forgiveness or revenge, just supporting whatever decisions I needed to make. We're talking about marriage, about building our own family, one where accomplishments are celebrated equally and love isn't rationed based on perceived potential. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far. If publicly exposing my family's dysfunction was cruel rather than just. But then I remember sitting at that promotion party, watching my parents laugh about how they'd rather be somewhere else, and I know I made the right choice. Not because revenge feels good. It mostly just feels quiet and empty, but because silence would have meant accepting their version of reality for the rest of my life. The article is still online. People still share it occasionally, usually when discussing family dynamics or workplace achievement. I've received messages from strangers who've lived similar experiences, thanking me for putting words to their own feelings of being overlooked and undervalued. If nothing else, maybe the whole mess helped someone else feel less alone in their struggle. I don't regret exposing the truth. I don't regret the family relationships that ended. I only regret that it took 32 years to finally stand up for myself, to demand the respect and recognition I'd always deserved. But better late than never. Better painful honesty than comfortable lies. Last week, I got promoted again. Division manager, overseeing 3 regional territories. This time, I didn't throw a party. I just took my girlfriend to that same restaurant, sat at a quiet table for 2, and celebrated privately. No parents to diminish the achievement. No brother to overshadow the moment. Just us, acknowledging how far I'd come despite everything. And that felt like the real victory.